Now, most people have seen in the modern, magazines and media that most engines are coming with an oil filter. So a pleated filter paper filter in a can. And what you do when you do an oil change is you take the filter off and you cut the can open and you pull out the pleats, and you go through this process of looking for, for whatever junk, nuts and bolts, small children, dead birds in your oil filter. Well, I don't have an oil filter. I have an old engine. It has an oil screen, and there are ways to get around this, and I certainly am not suggesting that I have the best way to do it. But what this video that I'm introducing here does is it shows you how I do it, which is pretty easy to do. It's not messy, and it gets me the information that I'm looking for when I do an oil change, which is namely how much metal is in the oil screen, how much coke is in the oil, and I think it's worth looking at, and I hope you like it. So without any further ado, here it is. Today's exercise is a demonstration of how to clean an oil screen as part of an oil change on an aircraft engine. So what we need is rags, of course, some naphtha, which you can buy at a paint store or a hardware store, a measuring cup for paint, a toothbrush for cleaning. It's a 1-inch nut to turn off the screen itself, various pliers to work safety wire, including safety wire twisters, paper towels, a flashlight. It's best to do this with nitrile gloves on. The oil contains lead and it's hazardous. And then a very important feature or tool is a pristine Ziploc bag. It needs to be pristine, not something that's been laying around, because we're going to put oil in this in order to check the oil itself. So with that in mind, here's how we do it. First thing we do is put on our gloves, and then I usually tear off some paper towels. Hopefully this will be enough. I usually set these right up here on top of the engine. Use one rag as a workspace to protect my table. Good place to store paper towels or on the Venturi. I'm sure that's not the an intended use of a Venturi, but that's a good use for it. So here's what we're talking about. Here's our oil screen housing. It's traditional. There's no filter on this engine. What I do is I check for leaks when I put this back together with this diaper. You can see there's a little bit of seepage there, but I've had problems where this leaks, which is to say I really only have had a problem with it once, but once was enough, right? I mean, so, you get oil everywhere. So now I check to make sure. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to undo the safety wire that has been on from last time. To do that, we need a pair of dikes. What I do is I grab hold of this right there. Pull this out just a little bit. I'm getting old, so I have trouble seeing this. It's kind of bad form to, when you clip off safety wire, to have it go flying around. So you want
you want to make sure that you don't lose a piece of it in the engine compartment. So you can see where I've clipped it. This is the pigtail. Pull that out. Set that here. And then this piece, you can see you can either untwist that, or easiest thing to do is just clip it right there and fight it when you take it off. Now, well, what we'll do is we'll break that loose, but we won't take it off. We'll just break it loose. So you can see here, actually, I guess it needs to be like this. Just pop it loose. And that turns my hand, okay? It's not real, it's tight, but it's crushing a gasket, so it doesn't get super tight, so it's easy to break loose. Now, before we undo that and make a big mess, what I do is I protect everything with rags. I also consider it a party foul if you spill even a drop of oil doing this. Just shows signs of being not as practiced as you'd like to be. But after doing this for years and years and years, it's pretty easy to protect everything and get it right. All right, so that's my hydraulic pump. So we'll cover that up with a rag. And this little pocket right here is right where we're going to put the Ziploc bag to collect the oil. So, and we're going to put the filter in that cup. All right, so here we go. We'll see how this goes. Tuck this in underneath there. We've got a place for the oil to go. Make sure it's stable. You can do this with the oil hot too. I usually do it with it cold. I usually drain the oil out of the engine with it hot for a couple hours or even overnight. And then in the end, I just drain this out cold. I think I get a better result. And the goal here, the reason you do this, is you want to see what's in this screen, and you want to see what's in the oil. So you pull this out, and the first thing I do is just wipe it off. Just wipe off the outside. That's all I'm really looking at this point. And then we take our flashlight and do a first pass to make sure there's nothing scary in the screen. And I'll see if I can find a picture of this full of metal from an engine overhaul gone bad. But this is pristine. This is exactly how it should look. So notice that we haven't spilt anything yet. And then this goes in our little can. I save all the paper towels, at least initially, and you can see this is still running out, so we'll let that run out for a few minutes. And you can see that where it's going into the Ziploc bag, and it's supported by rags. So if there were a pinhole in the Ziploc bag, most of the oil would wind up being soaked up by the rag itself. So there's a very good chance that we'll be able to get through this without spilling any. That's the idea anyway. This technique works on the road when I've been gone for like a month, and through an oil change interval, I've done this on the road, on the ramp. Generally, I try and find an FBO or maintenance shop that's friendly, that'll let you give them your waste oil. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, you have to go buy a bucket, which is no big deal either. Anyway, the way I clean this up is with my naphtha. I don't fill it completely full. And then I usually take a paper towel and I plug this hole with something that's reasonably absorbent. I don't like to leave the Ziploc bag in here for very long. And I pull the Ziploc bag out, make sure it's not leaking, and I shut it. And I try and shut it with getting most of the air out. And then the next step for me is to go shine light through this. Now, what I've discovered is that you can do this with a flashlight, but what works really good for me is toward the end of the day with my hanger facing west. If I put this up in one of the windows, you can see what it is you're looking for. So we're looking at these specks, and each one of these specks, we don't have to do all of them, but we want to do a bunch of them. We want to see if there's anything that's in here that's metal. These aren't metal. You can tell with your fingernail. You can break them apart and smear them out. And what that is, in case you were wondering, is that's coke. Coke is a name applied to hydrocarbons that have been cooked up in an oxygen-free environment. So you basically turn the liquid hydrocarbons into charcoal. And that coke would build up on piston skirts and the hot parts of the engine. And what we're trying to do is just make sure that the little pieces and parts here that are going through the screen are carbon and not metal. And occasionally you'll see metal come out. Especially like after you do a top or something, you'll see a sliver of bronze or something. But in this case, I don't see anything that it even remotely causes alarm. If there were lots and lots of these little particles, like a teaspoonful, maybe that would be an indication of a problem. But really, this is what I always see. And that is the extent, that is the whole heart of what you're trying to do. So we pulled the oil that was in the oil screen housing out. We collected it in a way that was safe. If you wanted to do oil analysis, you could take a sample of this. It's pristine, and send it in. I don't do that anymore. I did that at one time, and then I just assume that this is going to leak. So I usually put this in the trash can. I'll drain that into my waste oil here in a minute. Then, as far as the screen goes, well, there's two things we need to do at this point. One is we need to take the filter off, or the gasket off, and there that is. You always use a new gasket. And then the other thing I like to do is remove this bit of safety wire here before I cut myself with it. And it's the same sort of thing. You don't want to lose track of the ends, because that'll wreak havoc with your tires and all kinds of stuff. Cut your fingers. So there you can see my 3 pieces of safety wire and my gasket. That's all trash. And then what you want to do is give this a thorough cleaning. That's what the toothbrush is for. If there were particles or things that you wanted to look at and collect in the screen itself, well, you now have them captured in a naphtha suspension in a container. That's why you don't fill the container up full. And you can just set that out or put it in an oven and blow off evaporate the naphtha, and you can concentrate that down to a goo. That would be a collection of whatever you're worried about, that you can then show your mechanic. So now you can see, if you hold this up, you can see that it's clear. The screen's got no particles in it whatsoever. You see how that works? So that's good. So that's the end of that. And then the last thing I do is I wipe this out. And I look at the paper towels that I pull out of here. And I don't see anything on that. Of course, by this point, we know there's nothing there because we've taken a good hard look at it. But this paper towel's got some naphtha on it, so it's good for cleaning. Same with this one. And you're just looking for anything that is in there that you don't want to be in there. Pieces of metal, you know, washers, screws, chicken bones, whatever. There shouldn't be anything in there. And obviously, when you do this, you want to check each paper towel when you pull it out. I like these blue towels because they've got some strength to them. Obviously, if you use something like Kleenex, well, that would be a real problem. But you want to make sure that the paper towel that you pull out is intact and you're not leaving any paper towel in there. I mean, some filaments of cellulose from a towel or a wipe would not be the end of the world. I think it would go through the system fine, but I would not look to do that. And that's basically it. I'm going to stop the video now, and then what I'll do is I will start it up again, going back together. AN 900-29. That's the crush washer that you use. I need a couple more of them. So you can see my waste oil container. I have it in my trash can, and what I do here, I mean, it's really not a good thing to let the oil that's got a lot of lead in it get into the environment. So wherever you can, try not to do that. Clothespins are one of my favorite things in the hanger. And what I'm going to do here is just cut the corner of the Ziploc bag off. You can see I've lost the gloves because it's pretty much done with the bad stuff at this point. And the best thing to do is just let that drain. Okay. So the crush washer goes like this. And there's a problem with these crush washers. If you read the A&P school kind of information on crush washers, it tells you that it's just like a quarter of a turn when you tighten it. But what I found is the crush washers are copper asbestos, or at least that's what they used to be. I think since asbestos is so bad, they don't use asbestos anymore on these. And so I've found that you need a little help in order to keep them from leaking. And the help that I use is this Molykote 55 grease. It's a Dow Corning product. And I just get the threads, the very coarse threads on my oil screen, and I just paint this on in like about 4 places. You don't want to use a lot, right? Because if you get this into your oil system, the oil won't wet it or wash it out. So it basically is there for the duration. And then the open side goes towards the engine. And then I just put this in finger tight. I use a paper towel to make sure that I don't have anything on the outside of the housing. It's also good to get the bottom of the magneto at this point. And then I pull my rags out. And I look at my rags and I see how I did, how much I spilled. In this case, I don't think I spilled any. So the last thing I'm going to do before I shut this down is I am going to tighten that, torque it down. And you have to do this tighter than you're supposed to. It's the only way to keep it from leaking. So I'm crushing the washer. I get it to where it's almost all crushed. But I found that you have to go after it that hard in order to keep it from leaking. So it's got to be crushed flat and then like an 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. And then we'll just safety wire it up and that'll be the end of it.